Today I want to talk about the Sabbath, but I'm not going to talk about the particulars of when the Sabbath started or when the Sabbath ended or anything like that. But I want to talk about just the Sabbath and how it is a moral commandment and what God kind of expects of us during this time. I'm not going to go into nitty-gritty details, but I want to show you how to understand the Sabbath, that you might glean the principles and apply them in your life, and just think about, is this something for me? We know that we're going to keep the Sabbath in heaven. We've seen that the Jews kept it. It can be shown that it was kept from creation, a little bit more difficult to do, but it was there. So you've had people that have kept it all through history. Somewhat, they've kept the Sabbath in many different ways and shapes and forms. But I want to talk about the principles of it, just to get minds thinking about it, whether or not it's for them, especially for people that are not keeping the Sabbath now. Is the Sabbath something that would be good to do, be good to keep, right? We are going to keep it in heaven. We've seen that. It was in the creation account. We've seen the Jews kept it. Let's just go through this. In Mark 2, verse 27, it says, "And he said unto them, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath." This is a beautiful verse. Right here, it tells us one thing. It was made for man. We know that the Sabbath wasn't for in heaven for all the angels and everybody up there, because it was made for man. And if they were all keeping it at that time or through eternity, then that would mean that man was made for the Sabbath because they came into it. But man came first, and then the Sabbath, because it was made for man. And that's something really crucial to understand, that it was here for man. God blessed the day and sanctified it. And you'll find that in Genesis 2, verse 2. Right? So this is supposed to be a blessing for man. But now let's get into some of the things that talk about it. I'm not even going to read the actual commandments about it. I'm just going to read different things about it. I want to keep this video short and just fairly concise. In Exodus 31, it says, verses 12 to 18, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak thou unto the children of Israel, saying, Verily my Sabbaths you shall keep." So here God's now saying, it's my Sabbath, right? So God blessed and sanctified the Sabbath, and he's saying it's my Sabbath. But we just had in Mark where it says the Sabbath was made for man. So this means that God and man are going to join together on the Sabbath. This was a day for both of them, but it was specifically made for man. Now I'll go a little bit further. I'm going to repeat that verse. "Speak thou unto the children of Israel, saying, Verily my Sabbaths you shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am the Lord that doth sanctify you." I guess I didn't repeat that verse. But anyways, I'll keep on going there. So this is a sign between God and ourselves, and it's a sign that God is the one that will sanctify us. "And ye shall keep the Sabbath therefore, for it is holy unto you. Every one that defileth shall surely be put to death. For whosoever doth any work therein, that soul shall be cut off from among his people. 6 days may work be done, but the 7th day is a Sabbath rest, holy to the Lord. Whosoever doeth any work in the Sabbath day, he shall surely be put to death. Wherefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations for a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and on the 7th day he rested and was refreshed. And he gave unto Moses, when he had made an end of communing with him upon Mount Sinai, 2 tables of the testimony, tables of stone written with the finger of God." So this is interesting. This is not the first time that God gave Moses 2 tables of stone. This is a second set that Moses got from God. And this was God explaining the Sabbath a little bit. What happened is when God gave the 10 Commandments, he talked about the Sabbath, but nobody understood it. Nobody understood what was going on and why they needed to keep it. But what we need to realize is that there's things that we do that are symbolic. Let's look at the Lord's Supper. It's completely symbolic. There's things that the churches do that are symbolic. Some things are added in, but some things God specifically tells us to do, which would be like communion and foot washing, right? Jesus says, hey, do this to wash each other's feet, right? And then he says, I want you to keep this supper where you break the bread and you have the wine. Those are things that we know specifically that God wants us to do. And the reason for it is everything we do is a sermon. We might not think that we're preaching, but our silent actions, everything that we do at work, everything that we do in the home, how you are in the home is a sermon to your children. And what you do and your spouse does will be what your children usually end up like, right? There can be outside influences that can affect them too. But your children's behavior will be a direct outcome of what the two parents are like in the home. And this is just common sense because they're watching these things all the time. They see what's going on and they're going, hey, this is what life is, and this is what life is about, and what life is like. So when God made the Sabbath, he was teaching something. The plan of salvation was put in place even though they had not sinned yet. God knew what was happening. And God wants us to know that Jesus is our rest, that we need to rest in Jesus. And this day is kind of commemorative. It's like a prophetic thing of what we're to do in Jesus. And this is why it is a day that we're going to rest with Jesus. In the new earth, we come together and we gather every Sabbath day to meet with Jesus in the New Jerusalem. But a lot of people will look at this and go, oh, this is, like you're going to be put to death if you don't keep it. Like, how much, like, why? Does God ever put anybody to death that is not breaking something moral? No. There's our first clue. If you're put to death for something, there must be something moral about it, something going on. And that's when we look at it, it says, my Sabbaths ye shall keep. It is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that ye may know that the Lord doth sanctify you. It means that it is something that we realize that we cannot do for ourselves. God is going to make our food keep and last. It will not go bad on the Sabbath day. Every need that we have will be supplied for us on the Sabbath day. There is no work for us to do. It is something where we have to trust completely and explicitly in God's saving power for us. There's a promise that our homes won't be broken into. There's a promise that there'll be no destruction. Everything you can think of, it is only a blessing on the Sabbath day. So what we need to understand is when God gave the commandment the first time, he didn't mention anything about dying, right? Just like thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery. All those things you know that if you do, you will not enter into heaven and you will die. You will die the second death and be no more, right? You don't burn in hell forever and ever and ever. You burn up eternally until everything of you is gone and there's no trace of you left. That way, every tear can be wiped away because there's going to be great mourning for the ones that we love who do not choose to follow Jesus and to live a life of love, complete, full, surrendered love to God and to others. So let's just look at some of the Bible verses that talk about this, right? Let's say the picking of sticks. There's a Bible story where a man was out gathering sticks, and then they found him gathering sticks on the Sabbath day, which he shouldn't have been doing. So they brought him to Moses because they didn't know what to do, even though these Bible verses say that, yeah, you need to die if they do this. But they're looking at it and going, why? Why is this happening, right? And this is where you need to understand the new covenant, right? We often look at the old covenant. God didn't like the old covenant. That was based on their promises. Even right from this point here, he's like trying to show them the new covenant. He's like, hey, accept the new covenant. We can forget this old covenant right here and now if you really want to, right? But they didn't quite get it. So they came to Moses, and then Moses had to go before God. Well, this man was non-repentant. He was completely rebellious. So God's like, hey, he's a heart full of rebellion. He's not repentant. If he would have been repentant, he could have repented and he could have, and he could have been free. But God says, no, he must die, right? He was not repentant. He was not going to repent, and God knew it. So he says, this man must die. So all of a sudden you see that it's death. But you're thinking in your mind, hey, this is supposed to be a sign, right? The Sabbath is a sign. So how does this work? Well, let's just look at the story of Moses. Right before they're about to enter into the promised land, the children of Israel started complaining. And Moses got angry. And, he went, he talked to God, and God's like, hey, you're going to bring forth. Did he talk to God? I don't remember. Read the story again. I can't remember. But anyways, he went and he spoke angrily to the people and struck the rock twice, right? And he could not enter into the promised land. right? He had to die before he could enter the promised land. This is symbolic, right? The promised land's representing heaven, but Moses had to die here, right? And then he instead of going to the promised land here on earth, he went to the promised land in heaven. Woo, beautiful, right? They're building the new Jerusalem up there, right? So he's kind of already there. Maybe he's overseeing stuff. I don't know. Who knows how that really works? But Moses speaking angrily to the crowd, was that a sin? Well, it might not have been a great thing. But did Jesus not get angry? Did he not overturn tables and speak angrily to people too? There was a righteous indignation. And while Moses might have spoken not uplifted God in what he said, because he says, what, shall we, when he's talking about him and Aaron, bring forth water out of this rock? And he struck the rock. The greater sin in this whole situation was that he struck the rock twice. Jesus is the rock, once smitten, not twice smitten. So Moses marred the symbol of Christ, and he could not enter into the promised land. We have to remember that we're a part of this world, but we're not of this world. We're to be and stand as a peculiar people. People watch everything we do, they listen to every word we say, and everything we say and do speaks and testifies whether we know Jesus or not, whether Jesus has come into our lives, made a reformation in our lives, or is in the process of making a reformation in our lives. And everything that we say and do should be drawing them to Jesus. It doesn't matter if we know that somebody's watching us. It could be from a satellite in space or whatever that is actually filming us. We could be walking down the street and there could be some video camera and we might do something, or the way we just in everything we do, it might speak to somebody and say, hey, that person looks different. I don't know about you guys, but I've had quite a few times where people came up to me and, they start talking. All of a sudden, they'd be cursing and swearing, and all of a sudden they stop and they apologize. They know that there's something different. Why they know? Well, maybe it's because I'm not swearing or cursing right along with them. I'm not telling them what they're doing is wrong, because God says everybody can live exactly the way they want to. So I'm not rebuking them or doing anything. I'm not preaching to them a sermon. And the only thing that happens is, for some reason, they must see something different in me, in you. I've heard other people say the same thing, where people all of a sudden apologize. So let's get on to a little bit different part of this now. In Exodus 35, verse 3, it says, "You shall kindle no fire throughout your habitation on the Sabbath day." Well, what does that mean, right? Especially for us people that live up here in the colder climates. Well, we just have to look at the New Testament, right? Jesus, time and time again, showed that the things that were necessary on the Sabbath could still be done, right? If your ox fell into a ditch, well, you pull them out. You're not going to let your child freeze to death. You're not going to do any of those things. Anything that is necessary on the Sabbath was fine to do. But if you forgot to do something and it wasn't prepared, you needed to leave it to help remind you that you need to be prepared for everything. And that's what the gospel is about. The gospel and the Sabbath is teaching today is a day of salvation, not tomorrow. If you put off your salvation, it might be lost, right? Your rest is in Jesus. We need to accept Jesus today. He is our Sabbath. The Sabbath points directly to Jesus in everything, in every particular. And it's just beautiful when you really see it. We can rest in Jesus, right? We rest on the Sabbath day. Now let's go to the symbolism of what's happening when you kindle a fire on the Sabbath day. Right? If it's cold, no problem. You need a fire to sustain warmth. Do you need to heat your food the whole time? No. Could they overhold coals? They could hold over coals. It was not hard for them to start a fire. You just put your thing in, blow a little bit, poof, your fire is going. So it's not just that we're not supposed to be working. It's actually teaching morality, right? The morality of the Sabbath is everything in Jesus. We can do nothing of ourselves, just like on the Sabbath day, we can do nothing for ourselves. We always have to remember, every physical application that we see in the Bible is teaching something spiritual. Jesus was constantly looking at nature and explaining the Bible from nature. So when it comes to a fire, what do you burn? You burn wood. What is wood from? Wood is from trees. So when you think about the story about the man gathering sticks, in John 15, verse 6, it says, "If a man abide not in me, he is cast forth as a branch and is withered, and men gather them and cast them into the fire, and they are burned." Well, here we have the symbology going right on there, right? So the man's gathering sticks. Sticks are from trees. Trees in the Bible are Christians, right? Jesus is a tree. He came forth as the branch, right? So everything, all the symbology is amazing. Jesus is a tree that we are grafted into, right? And on the Sabbath day, the rest, what happens with all these people what's supposed to happen when we finally come to our full rest? All these things that represent people, I'm going to say people, are to be cast into the fire, right? They're to go to hell. So you're not supposed to gather sticks on the Sabbath day. It's a witness, it's a testimony, because a stick represents Jesus. You don't cast it on the fire. The Sabbath day is about building up. It's about growth, and it's not thinking about death and destruction. While we can come and we can have the Sabbath and we can go to church and they might preach a sermon that brings conviction, that conviction should not be always, you're going to burn in hell and end there. The conviction should be, hey, this is not right. We know what's going to happen. And if you don't know, they might be mentioned in the service, right? But it's to bring you out of those things that do that. The Sabbath is a day of building up, not destruction. So when you have a fire, it's only about destruction. Even just watching a fire and throwing sticks on here and there, people, we all love fires and we all love to look at fires, and there's something comforting about it, which sometimes can be a little unnerving when we think about, what's going to happen in the end with the fire. But everything that we put in there is consumed. And on the Sabbath day, it's not about consuming things, it's about building up things. When the priests went to the temple, they made bread on the Sabbath day, right? The bread represented the word of God. The word of God was preached. It was done like that, and it was consumed, and it nourished, and it strengthened. It was not destroyed and brought to nothing. So now we've talked about the symbolism, but I want to go back to the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. When we realize that God cannot infringe upon man, God cannot make man work on the Sabbath day. He's like, hey, this is my day and this is your day. On this day, we're going to get together. I will not ever ask you to do anything that will infringe upon the Sabbath day, because I made this specifically for you. This is a day where we can come and get to know each other. We'll know our love for each other, because I'm not ever going to make you work. I don't ever expect you to work. Just as you're not going to expect me to work on this day, and that I'll come and I'll be with you, because this is my Sabbath. So God instituted the Sabbath for him and for us at the same time. It's just amazing. And then that also flows out into our daily lives. It means that we can never enslave anyone else underneath us. If we have a business, everything needs to shut down on the Sabbath day. The only things that can be okay, say like you're a doctor and somebody's dying, you need to help them. Do you need to be there to do paperwork? No, you don't need to be there to do paperwork, right? Do you need to be there just to watch somebody? No. You can have maybe one or two people there to deal with emergencies that might happen on the Sabbath day. But all in all, it's not a day about working. There's many doctors and nurses that transgress the Sabbath day. God's like, this is a day for me and you. And they need to rotate through those things. It shouldn't be always the same people doing these things. We're not to be enslaved to anybody. If I were to go out and find an employer and ask them about a job and they say, hey, I want you to work on the Sabbath day, I have to say, no, I need to keep this day free for me and God. This is a day that we get together. This is a sign. This is my testimony. This is my witness. This is me living out my faith. This is faith developing in me and strengthening me, because God says, I will bless thee. I will provide for every one of your needs. You will never, ever have to worry if you follow me and keep all my statutes, laws, and judgments, right? And the Sabbath is one of them. I can never make anybody work for me. And this is why I don't go out to different places. And some people might say, well, they're already working there. But if I go to that place and I'm like, they're already working, I'm not working, but I'm just going to buy something, then I'm already putting in place and setting up a system saying, hey, just by my being there means that, hey, on this day, people want this service or people want this product. And then they're like, so then now these people are enslaved to work on that day. If nobody went on the Sabbath day, everybody would have that free. And that's what God entails. And we just don't do as the Romans, right? The saying says, when in Rome, do as the Romans. We don't do that. That is not biblical. God says, when in Rome, do as I do. That is how we do it. So we don't go out, we don't go make people work. And while you might say, oh, I'm just going to a gas pump and I just use my card and I put it in. Well, now you have people that are watching your credit cards the whole time to make sure that everything goes okay. You have the person in that gas station at night having to tally off the pumps. You have people now that might even have to come, right? If all the Sabbath keepers did it, they might have to come and refill the station on that day. And it goes on and on. It's not like it's just a single individual. It's not like, I'm just dealing with a computer and that's it. And there's nobody behind the scenes. There's people behind the scenes and everything. For that one transaction at a gas pump, you probably made 3 or 4 people work, and maybe even hundreds. Who even knows? If somebody all of a sudden hacked your card at that time because you're doing that, then it has to be reported. Now it becomes an investigation. It could be huge, and you have no idea. So should you do those things? No. God says, be prepared. The preparation day was a day to prepare for Sabbath. By going to these places and doing these things, we inadvertently enslave these people to their taskmasters, right? How many of you guys have been in jobs and you know that your employer is more or less a taskmaster? A lot of people feel this way. And there's probably a lot of truth in it. They're like, here, yeah, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. And you can be trying as hard as you can, trying to be really good, and they'll still come down on you. Or maybe not come down on you, right? But they'll always want to get the most productivity out of you that they can, which sometimes will violate the laws of health. People will work so hard that they'll injure themselves and cause more harm than good. And then you're enslaved, right? But Jesus says we are not slaves, right? We can never be slaves. We are bondmen. We are servants. There's a difference between a bondman and a slave. The Bible uses both terms, right? You can be a bondman to somebody, but that means that, at any time you can redeem yourself. Somebody else can redeem you, right? You are not a slave, which means you can never, ever, ever leave, right? Even in the Jewish system, it's pretty interesting because it talks about, buying a slave, right? And that they come into your home. But Jesus, even still in all that, he makes a way of escape. He's like, if somebody leaves that one taskmaster and goes to another person, then they become a servant of the other person and they're no longer underneath that taskmaster or bondman, right? It's just so beautiful. The Bible's so clear. Anti-slavery. The Sabbath is anti-slavery in every way. I cannot let my money situation enslave me to my job. I cannot let somebody else's money situation enslave them to working for me. I can't be enslaved to God because I can't do anything on the Sabbath day. If he tells me to do something on the Sabbath day that violates his commandments, I just have to say, sorry, God, this day was made for me. And claim that promise boldly, just boldly. Of course, God will never do that, but that's just what it is. So I want you to think about these things. God's like, hey, this Sabbath day, I've made it. It's going to be a testimony that you're free. I can't make you work. You're even free from me, right? This means that you have complete freedom. We always know that we're free in God, right? We can choose whether to serve him or whether not to. But the Sabbath day for Christians makes it even more intact as to how God's like, I give you complete and utter freedom, right? And the reason why the people that needed to die on the Sabbath, if they did not do it, is because they set up a false testimony and they would cause others to fall away and not accept Jesus as their Savior. If we can't accept Jesus, the true Sabbath, the true rest, who we rest in, then we'll never enter into heaven. And this will be a memorial of Jesus' love for us and the freedom that he's given to us for eternity. In Isaiah 58, verse 12, it says, and they that shall be of thee shall build up the old waste places. Thou shalt rise up the foundations of many generations, and thou shalt be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of paths to dwell in. If thou turn thy foot away from the Sabbath, from doing thine own pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, and holy of the Lord, honorable, and shalt honor him, not doing thine own ways, nor finding thine own pleasure, nor speaking thine own words? Then shalt thou delight thyself in the Lord, and I will cause thee to ride upon high places of the earth, and feed thee with the heritage of Jacob thy father, for the mouth of the Lord hath spoken it. Isn't that a beautiful passage? Can we find that same passage in the New Testament? Well, I dare say that we can under different words. In Hebrews 4:4-11, it says, For he spake in a certain place of the seventh day on this wise, and God did rest the seventh day from all his works. And in this place again, if they shall enter into my rest, seeing therefore it remaineth that some must enter therein, and they to whom it was first preached entered not in because of unbelief. Again, he limiteth a certain day, saying in David, Today, after so long a time, as it is said, Today, if you will hear his voice, harden not your hearts. For if Jesus had given them rest, then would he not have afterwards have spoken of another day? No. There remaineth therefore a rest to the people of God. For he that is entered into his rest, he also has ceased from his own works as God did from his. Let us labor therefore to enter into that rest, lest any man fall after the same example of unbelief. It's my hope and my prayer that you might consider the things that I've just talked about, and that you might find your rest in Jesus, and that you might find the Sabbath day and look to it. It is his sign that shows whether or not we are really following him. But we must see the Sabbath from the Bible and the Bible alone. If we get it from any worldly source, it will not be the sign that Jesus wants us to show. And when we show forth this sign, his glory, right, the glory of the Sabbath day, will be spread through the whole earth as a witness that Jesus is coming soon.